Dubious Khan, and welcome into the Idiot Box, where we take a look at television of the past and present and try to figure out where things went so horribly, horribly wrong. Who doesn't love the Back to the Future trilogy?
It's a great story with memorable characters, quotable lines, spectacular effects, and according to most leading physicists, the closest Hollywood has ever come to making a realistic movie involving time travel.
So naturally, with the conclusion of the trilogy in the spring of 1990, a lot of fans were disappointed that there weren't going to be any more adventures with Doc and Marty as they journeyed through time. But fortunately, executives at CBS and Universal were leaping to the rescue.
Like a lot of studios at that time, Universal, wanting their new animation department to rival those of Warner Brothers and Disney, decided to get into the Saturday morning cartoon market, and what better way to do it than with an animated series based off one of their most successful franchises? And even better, do it with actual actors from the movies reprising their roles. And on top of that, at the behest of executive producer Bob Gale, include some actual real-life applicable science in each episode so that there's some educational value as well.
And so, in the fall of 1991, we got Back to the Future, the animated series.
And boy howdy, were fans of the movies disappointed. The show was so over the top and bent the general premise of the film so far into cartoonish antics that it began bearing more of a resemblance to Peabody's Improbable History than Back to the Future.
But really, that's just a general problem with the show. Let's take a look at some specifics as I detail 5 reasons why Back to the Future, the animated series, doesn't work.
Reason number 1. Major changes as to how time travel is supposed to work. Right off the bat, we can see an inherent problem here. It's spelled out for us that Doc, despite his repeated insistence on destroying it in Back to the Future Part 3, has built a brand new DeLorean time machine.
Always take the aluminum foil off your burrito before you put it in the microwave. Which brings me to the question, what's the biggest problem with the new DeLorean?
15 on the highway, 12 in the city?
False! If you park it on the street, it's bound to get ripped off.
Well, sure, because it's a time machine.
'Cause it's a DeLorean! These things are collector's items. However, watch this! Programmed only to open at the sound of my voice or Einstein's bark.
Whoa! Heavy!
Heavy indeed! 2,796 pounds to be exact. After all, there's a car in there.
Yeah, I know. We'll get to that. But even this is workable since Doc built the train in the first place. I mean, maybe he figured that a new DeLorean wouldn't hurt things any more than they already were. Who knows? But then this happens.
Look what I've done inside the car. The time circuits are now audio activated. For random example, February 7th, 1895, Baltimore, Maryland.
Right here. This is where we get our first major deviation from the movies. In the films, Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale held to H.G. Wells' theory put forth in The Time Machine that a time travel vehicle would travel in time but not in space. And this is in fact what happens. When the DeLorean reaches 88 miles per hour, it instantly breaks through the time barrier and arrives in the new time period in the exact same spatial point that it left in the old time period.
In short, if you hit 88 miles per hour in the parking lot of Twin Pines Mall in 1985, and your time circuits are set for 1955, you're going to arrive in the same place you left. Although in 1955, the land on which Twin Pines Mall was built turns out to be Old Man Peabody's farm, and he's probably not happy with the intrusion.
And as a result, the animated series takes us all over the place.
From ancient Rome to Victorian London to the Civil War and everywhere in between. And while this does open up story possibilities, it does mean that the characters should, by all rights, have whizzed history completely down the toilet by now, given how much they interfere with major historical events. Reason number 2. Over-reliance on somebody stealing or borrowing the DeLorean.
As was established in Back to the Future Part 3, Doc Brown married Clara Clayton and they had 2 sons, Jules and Vern. For the purposes of the animated series, the Browns have moved to Hill Valley in the present, where Clara continues working as a school teacher and Doc continues his career as an inventor in the entertaining town Crazy. As for the Brown boys themselves, Jules takes the most after his father, playing up the boy genius trope to annoying degrees with lines like this.
Face it, Vern, you lack the basic intellectual skills one would naturally expect in a member of the Brown lineage. You show no aptitude for science whatsoever. Fail to resemble mother, father, or myself in any of the primary chronological specifications, and as a capper, father has failed to provide you with your own personal hoverboard.
No 10 to 12-year-old boy talks like this, especially not one being raised in a modern time period.
Vern, on the other hand, acts more like a typical kid. obnoxious, mischievous, and concerned about being seen as cool by his peers. This means, of course, that a lot of the plots revolve around Vern using the DeLorean for selfish purposes.
And by a lot, I mean 10 of the 26 episodes of this series involve Vern or some combination of Jules, Vern, and Marty stealing the DeLorean for some selfish purpose.
Vern gets annoyed at being told he's too little to do stuff he wants to do, so he takes the DeLorean for a joyride. Vern wants an earring, his parents say no, so he convinces Marty to take him back to the Age of Pirates to get one. Vern gets tired of taking flack about his name, so he uses the DeLorean to go convince classic author Jules Verne to change his name.
One question, Dr. Brown. If you're so smart, why don't you lock up the keys to your time machine so your hot-headed offspring can't steal it?
Most of the time, when Jules and Vern both take the DeLorean, they either visit or end up screwing around with some element of their father's personal history for their own gain. They stow away in the DeLorean on one of Doc's trips to ancient Rome to check out the arcade, not realizing that Doc means the architectural definition of arcade. When they discover Doc has a traumatic fear of fishing, they travel back to try to prevent the event that caused the trauma from happening, and inadvertently get their 4-year-old father in the entertainment industry as a daredevil. They do this 6 times in the series, and usually they convince Marty to be their willing accomplice to this idiocy. Hell, on more than one occasion, it's Marty who decides to swipe the DeLorean to mess around with something that's rubbed his ego the wrong way, such as finding out that one of his ancestors was the worst pro baseball player in history, and setting out to change that.
Yeah, that's a real responsible use of time travel there, boys. Speaking of Marty, more often than not, he goes along on these little trips into Doc's personal past, and for the most part, there's not really a problem since only 2 of these events happen after Marty's original trip to 1955. It's those 2 events which tend to cause a little bit of problems.
In the Season 2 episode of Vern by Any Other Name, Vern and Marty travel back to 1800s France so that Vern can convince Jules Verne to change his name, as Vern hates his own. The author rejects the idea, so Marty and Vern instead travel to the day of Vern's birth in an effort to convince Doc and Clara to choose a different name.
You seeing the inherent problem here yet? Since the series makes a big deal about taking place after the events of the movies, it would mean that at this point, Doc has not yet built the time train, which means as far as he knows, Marty traveled back to 1985 and destroyed the original DeLorean as instructed. If this is the case, how do you think he's going to react when he sees Marty and some unknown young boy running around in the late 1800s?
Fortunately, the writers and the animators thought of that. And while Vern, who is unknown to the Doc and Clara in this time period, is able to interact with them with no problems as long as he doesn't let slip who he is, Marty is kept busy with the dilemma of getting the DeLorean out of a tree through most of the episode and never interacts with the Browns.
Clear thinking and foresight on the part of the writers, right?
Except that 2 episodes later, in the episode My Pop's an Alien, in an effort to clear up a major misunderstanding which results in the authorities believing that Doc is an alien, Marty, Jules, and Vern travel back to 1967, where Biff Tannen spotted Doc flying an experimental airborne observatory and mistook it for an alien spacecraft.
Again, not a real problem, right? Just use the same technique from a Vern by Any Other Name and keep Marty out of Doc's way.
Nope. Marty not only doesn't avoid Doc, he interacts with him extensively.
Remember, this is 1967. This is the Doc Brown who not only helped Marty travel back to the future from 1955, but also helped him travel back to the past to 1885. And he knows, via his future self's letter, that the DeLorean is supposed to be destroyed when it arrives in 1985. So he should be furious, if not actively demanding answers the second he sees Marty. But throughout the whole episode, he acts like he doesn't even know him. I know, it's only a cartoon, right? Well, hang on, because I'm about to address that issue right now.
Reason number 3. Introduction of over-the-top cartoonishness. Executive producer Bob Gale, who also co-produced and co-wrote the 3 movies, insisted when this series was pitched that there be some actual science involved in the show. So usually some sort of scientific concept was introduced in the main plot of the episode and elaborated upon in the live-action segments that closed the show. Yes, that is Bill Nye the Science Guy, and it was these segments that helped him eventually get his own program.
But I digress. My main problem here is that for all the use of real science in this show, it gets subverted by ridiculous cartoon antics, and I'm not talking like regular slapstick here.
Marty gets flattened like a pancake. Doc's inventions range from ridiculously impractical to violating some basic laws of physics. And while any dubious science is explained satisfyingly enough in the plot, these Looney Tunes-style gags just aren't funny, and they fly in the face of the more human nature type of humor that the series does much better.
Not only that, what the hell is up with the character designs in this series?
While Marty, the Browns, the various Tannins, and even Marty's girlfriend Jennifer are designed as caricatures of the actors in the movies, the supporting and background characters of the series are really over the top. Bizarre physiology, weird faces, even some characters who show up as either blue or green, for crying out loud.
So this means that the animators either just didn't care, or somehow Hill Valley is more polluted than Tromaville.
Toxic Crusaders, Toxic Crusaders. I had no friends, no girls that hugged me till I got radioactive ugly. Toxic Crusaders, Toxic Crusaders.
Yeah, we'll get to them soon enough.
Reason number 4. Strange voice casting decisions.
These days, we're pretty used to the idea of major and minor celebrities doing voiceover work on animated series. The Simpsons started this trend with its guest star spots, but it really wasn't a common thing in morning and afternoon TV shows until Batman the Animated Series came along in 1992. But about a year earlier, Back to the Future was already laying the groundwork.
Film series stars Mary Steenburgen and Thomas F. Wilson reprised their roles as Clara Clayton Brown and Biff Tannen, respectively. And, as is tradition, Tom Wilson also voiced the various other members of the Tannen clan which seemed to show up everywhere the main cast traveled.
Is there a Tannen in every century?
To round out the rest of the cast, David Kaufman did a passable voice for Marty, and Simpsons alumni Dan Castellaneta provided the voice of Doc Brown.
Not a big deal, right? Decent voice actors all around. Well, yes, and no. And the problem lies in one other very odd casting decision.
Greetings! Dr. Emmett L. Brown here, creator of the Auto-Jog mechanical running shorts, the Deep Thought mind-reading helmet, and perhaps my most important invention, the flux capacitor.
They cast Christopher Lloyd to play Doc in the live-action opening and closing segments. Again, not a bad idea, but the problem comes when you hear the two voices one right after the other. Allow me to illustrate. Christopher Lloyd.
I mean it, Vernie! No more pogo sticks in the laboratory!
Dan Castellaneta.
Wait a second, son. The flywheel needs tightening. Now try it.
Now, I don't know what the actual story is here. Maybe Christopher Lloyd didn't have the time to commit to a regular voice role in the series. Maybe his price was too high and the producers were only willing to pay for the live-action segments. Maybe Christopher Lloyd just didn't like the fact that Doc was going to be spewing lines like this.
Ouch, I'm a goucher. I'll ring my Alexander Graham Bell. Okey McDokey. I like that.
But either way, commit to one or the other, people. If it had been just Dan Castellaneta's voice throughout the entire series, we probably wouldn't have even have noticed. But when we get them back to back like that, the difference is glaring. You should have either convinced Christopher Lloyd to play the whole series all the way through, or just ditch the live-action sequences altogether. And speaking of glaring voices, that brings me to my other major problem with the voice acting in this series. A lot of the times in any given episode, the supporting characters don't even get a real voice. They just get some half-assed celebrity impression.
For example, in the episode Roman Holiday, Marty, Doc, and the boys travel back to ancient Rome and encounter a slave named Judah. Naturally, it's revealed that the slave is actually Judah Ben-Hur, and if you hadn't guessed this, they make it painfully obvious by having the voice actor do a horrible Charlton Heston impression.
I never got the name.
It is Judah. Judah Ben-Hur.
In another episode, we get to meet Clara's parents. Mary Steenburgen provides the voice of Clara's mom, and her dad got the voice of...
Hey, that's great, isn't it? Yeah.
Bob Hope. And sometimes the voice isn't really an impression at all, just one that's really odd and inappropriate. Take this voice for Ben Franklin, for example.
I used to say that fish and guests stink after 3 days, but in your case, let's make that 5 minutes.
Are you starting to see the resemblance to Mr. Peabody and Sherman yet?
Let's take the Wayback Machine to the year 1886.
Are we going to visit a wigwam manufacturer?
In a way, yes. For today, we shall smoke the peace pipe of one of history's most famous Indians, Geronimo. We set the Wayback controls for the territory of Arizona, and just like that, we were standing in the parade grounds of Fort Heathen. Obviously, there was an important conference going on.
Great White Father back in Washington, D.C. want peace.
Geronimo want them peace, too. Peace of Arizona, peace of New Mexico, peace of Colorado.
Now, look here. Either you sign this peace treaty, I'm going to put you in a guardhouse.
You joshing.
Oh, yeah? Arrest him, man.
Hold it. Me sign them treaty.
Reason number 5. Einstein. It's been established that Doc Brown is a dog lover. He has 2 dogs over the course of the movies, Einstein in the 80s and Copernicus in the 50s.
So naturally it was decided that Einstein should appear in the series because a lot of people liked the idea of Doc having a dog. It humanized the character and made him more accessible. Unfortunately, if you've been paying attention to the other reasons on this list, you'll know exactly where this is heading.
Yep, they don't have him acting much like a dog. Okay, he doesn't talk and all, but he has human traits which surpass even Pluto, to the point that on more than one occasion, he drives the train.
Seriously, the dog is smart enough to drive the train, set the coordinates for the flux capacitor, pull everybody's fat out of the fire on more than one occasion, and not only that, everybody can understand what he's saying despite the fact he only talks in barks and growls.
Hell, he gets one episode all to himself where a couple of bank robbers steal the DeLorean while he's inside and accidentally travel back to the days when Australia was a penal colony. Einstein rescues them and drops them off at the police station, and Doc, who stupidly left the keys in the damn car to begin with, doesn't even notice, except that suddenly the car's out of gas when he just filled the tank. I'm sorry, but when the dog didn't have that much to do in the movies, he shouldn't have been made a major supporting character in the series.
So there you have it, 5 reasons why Back to the Future the animated series doesn't work. And if you want my honest opinion on the show, it really isn't all that bad.
Despite my nitpicking, the show is pretty solid. When the cartoonish aspects don't take over, the stories are pretty engaging, and the writers in some cases did some serious research into the time periods they set their stories. Show me any other cartoon that would actually show a debtor's prison in Victorian England. The voice acting, while a little jarring and occasionally irritating, is still really good, and I want to point out that Thomas F. Wilson seems to be having a ball with playing the various Tannins throughout history. And I'd be remiss if I didn't point out what has to be the highlight of Biff's appearances throughout the show. From the episode where Doc's mistaken for an alien...
What a chump.
The GV500 is on special discount for tonight's comet, the mighty Kahui.
I'll take 2 if you got him. Kahui!
Gesundheit.
Did he say the comet Kahui was coming?
Boy, what was your first clue?
Kahui! Kahui won't worry! I gotta change my shoes! Get it! Comet Kahui! I haven't even gone shopping! Comet Kahui! Help me! Comet Kahui! The aliens are coming again! Aliens! I've seen it with my own 2 ears! Aliens! Aliens?
How unique.
I'm on the scene in Hill Valley, but so far see no sign of the reported...
Aliens! Get out of town while you still can! Women, children, and people with flat tops first! Hey, I seen you on TV. You're good.
A quick analysis of this situation indicates that mass hysteria is affecting the population.
Now tell me that wasn't hilarious. In all honesty, as goofy and weird as it is, and even though Bob Gale has stated on record that it should be considered to take place in an alternate timeline from that of the movies, Back to the Future the animated series is one of the few gems that managed to shine brightly in the declining years of Saturday morning cartoons as we used to know them. The show still occasionally pops up in syndication, and I'm sure if you looked hard enough you could probably find it online. And who knows, maybe one day Universal will decide to release the whole series on DVDs for die-hard Back to the Future fans and their kids to watch and enjoy. I'm Dubious Khan. Join me next time for another trip into the Idiot Box.